Hey everyone, I've been dealing with a curious networking issue at home and I figured you might be interested in checking this out too. Oh no, it's another one of those hand-wavy videos that everybody loves to hate. Anyway, I picked up a couple of these smaller network switches. These are totally unmanaged, very basic. What's actually kind of neat though is it has 2 ports that can do 10 gigabit Ethernet and then 4 ports that can do 2.5 gig Ethernet. The whole idea is my NAS lives in a different room from my desktop computer. I have one network cable running between the 2 rooms and it's a massive pain in the ass to try and pull anything else. So I wanted to come up with a solution to get 10 gigabit through a regular Cat5e, Cat6, whatever cable between the 2 computers. Plus, of course, I've got some other devices on either side as well, so a switch on each end makes the most sense. So I picked up these, and because I'm using Cat5e cable between the 2 rooms, I need some way to convert the 10 gig into that format. So maybe we take a step back and kind of talk about network cabling options and all of that, just so you can get an idea as to what I'm dealing with and what led up to the situation that I found myself in now. So you're probably familiar with this. This is an Ethernet cable, right? And it's got a regular RJ45 on each end. Technically, these are 8P8Cs, just to get ahead of those comments. And this cable in particular is Cat5e. There are other styles and varieties of Ethernet cable. This one is one of those really cool kind of thin varieties. They say this is Cat6. That doesn't mean it actually complies with Cat6. There's a whole bunch of like minutia about all of that I'm just not going to get into. You can argue amongst yourselves down below. But officially, you can actually run 10 gigabit networking over category cable. And officially, you need to use at least Cat6 to do 10 gig up to 30 meters and Cat6a to do 10 gig up to 100 meters. I've got Cat5e between the 2 rooms, between, where my computer is and my NAS is. In practice, that works fine because that run is maybe 25 to 30 feet long. It works fine. So that is not a factor in the issue that I've been dealing with. So let's take a closer look at the front of this switch. We've got regular network jacks on the front like you would plug any cable into, and these can do up to 2.5 gig. But then you've got these 2 curious ports over here on the side. If you've never seen these before, these are called SFP connectors. This one on the right doesn't have anything in it, and the idea is that these are fully modular connectors, meaning you can plug different what they call transceivers into these to change which physical cable type you're going to use with the switch. These particular jacks on here are SFP plus ports because they can do 10 gig. Regular SFP connectors can only do 1 gig. And there are higher end connectors like SFP28 can do 25 gig. And there's other ones that'll do 40 gig and 100 gig and really, really fast connections. Now, the simplest kind of cable that you can connect between 2 switches that have these SFP plus ports is called a DAC. That's direct attached coaxial. Some people call it direct attached copper. But either way, the idea is you've got transceivers basically built into each end of it with copper cabling in between them. And what's nice is these are super cheap and they're just dead reliable, right? Like there's really not a whole lot of active electronics going on inside one of these. So you don't really have to worry too much about failures and that sort of thing. The downside is that, one, they're permanently attached. So, if you need to run this through a wall, which generally you would not want to do, but the minimum size of the hole that you'd have to have is like the size of the transceiver, right? You can't just drill a small hole. The other thing is these kind of max out at relatively short distances. I think the longest DAC cables I've ever seen for sale are around 7 meters long. You might be able to get a custom one that's like 8 or 10, but that's about it, right? Past, say, 30-ish feet, 10 meters or so, you have to move into a different medium, which let's go take a look at those now. The majority of people, when they see an SFP connector, they're usually thinking fiber optics. And here is one of those fiber optic transceivers, right? So it's just this little pluggable module. It's got connections on the bottom that made up with connections inside the switch. And you pull the end off here. This is just a rubber cap, and then that's where your fiber plugs in. This uses single mode fiber, which is the fiber that everyone really should use. And all right, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent / rant here. I see so often in videos on YouTube, people setting up, home labs where they want to get some enterprise gear going, or they want to do faster network connections through their house, kind of like what I'm doing, and they decide to pull fiber. a lot of times they're misinformed as to what they should be doing for that, and they'll pull a different kind of fiber than what I think everyone really should be using. There's really 3 kinds of fiber out there, and 2 of them are a lot older technology than the one that I advocate for. A lot of times what I'll see people pull is multimode fiber, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but multimode fiber is a lot more limited in terms of the kinds of connections and speeds and whatnot that you run over it. So the color of the cable is actually kind of the clue as to what it's capable of, what kind of fiber it is. If you see fiber patch cables that have an orange or teal, what they call aqua colored jacket, that means it's multimode. Don't install that because you're just limiting what you're going to be able to do with it in the future. Single mode fibers are always yellow like this on the patch cables. And what's neat about single mode is this stuff is going to be good into the future. Like 100 years from now, we're probably going to keep using the same single mode fiber cable. So it just bothers me when people, cheap out by $5 or $10 and buy the aqua colored multimode cable. And yeah, you can run 10 gig over that, but in 10 or 20 years, if you want to do something faster, you're going to be kind of limited in your options versus if you had just spent a little bit more money and done single mode to begin with. Anyway, so that's all well and good, but there are plenty of houses and businesses that already have category cable installed through the walls. And if you want to upgrade to 10 gig and you're thinking along the lines of having to do fiber, that's a lot of time and effort and potentially money to rerun a bunch of cabling throughout your building. It's a lot better if you can reuse what you've already got. And so that's the whole point of doing 10 gig over category cable. In a switch like this, where it's got SFP plus slots that are capable of 10 gig, what I've been noticing lately is transceivers like this, where you can stick that in the SFP slot and it'll give you a 10 gig port over category cable. Here's where we get into the crux of the problem that I discovered. I've had this setup working for probably 2 years now or so. I've got an identical switch in the other room and another, module just like this in the switch in the other room. And I had a cable, running through the wall between them, and it worked great. But that connection was starting to become unstable. It was dropping frames periodically. Like every few seconds, I'd lose 1 or 2 frames over the link. And that's really weird. The cabling itself hadn't changed. It's run through the wall, so it's not like the cable itself physically got pinched or anything. And 2, the other thing that I discovered with these transceivers is there's some weird manufacturing thing with them where they don't want to release from the switch very well. In fact, in the other switch, I had to pry the transceiver out in order to remove it from the switch, and there was a bit of collateral damage in the process. What I noticed, and here's the reason why this switch is plugged in and turned on, these transceivers get incredibly hot. Like, let's see if I can get the laser temperature measurement thing here to give us an idea as to where it's at. But if I get it on there right, see, I'm seeing like 105 degrees Fahrenheit, upwards of 40 Celsius or more. And so you can only imagine, coupled with the heat that's just generated by a switch like this, and there's no fan or anything in here, and there's obviously no like heatsink fins or whatever, that's too hot to touch. That runs really hot. And what I think is going on is these modules are basically just cooking themselves. And either this one or this other one just basically started failing. So I think the idea is let's take this one, because it's already a little bit more broken, and crack it open and see what's going on inside. I'm curious what kind of circuitry and chipset and whatnot is in here, and then we'll also discuss some interesting peculiarities about what this module is actually doing. The first thing that I'm noticing is it may not be super obvious on camera, but this label is actually a little bit yellowed. And I've got another transceiver here that's from a different manufacturer that I had also been using for a while. And look at how bad this one is. And I'd like to say this one actually got even hotter than this one. This one's from FS, this one's from ProLabs. These just notoriously run really hot. And thankfully there have been some advancements, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but it just kind of leads further credence to the fact that, like, if the label is getting this yellow and it started out bright white, this thing is absolutely just cooking itself to death. And that's probably what's causing like all the, horrible traffic issues that I've been seeing on these transceivers. So it looks like getting into this one, we can just kind of pry up this collar of sorts, and I think this top panel just comes off. Let's see what that entails. We may need to fast forward through me faffing about on this quite a bit. I mean, this thing's already broken, right? What am I gonna do, break it more? There we go. Oh, interesting. And they know this sucker gets hot because there's a little thermal pad on the inside of this lid. There's actually not a whole lot going on in here, but let's see if I can get the circuit board out at least, and that'll give us a better look at this whole thing. So I'm not an expert by any means in this sort of thing, but as you can tell, we've got a chip here, and what this is going to do is handle all of the like physical / electrical matters around getting data in and out of the copper connection here. This thing probably has all the isolation transformers that you'd normally get. They call those magnetics. And yeah, because I'm not seeing any other coils or anything on the back here. I am seeing some other ICs back here, which are probably some power regulation stuff. And boy, looking at the bottom, again, this is kind of difficult to tell, but this section of the PCB is definitely like a more yellowy color of green than out here. Can you see how that changes? It just gets darker. This board has certainly gotten hot, and you might also be able to kind of tell on the edge here too, right? It gets darker the closer you get to the chip. So clearly this chip is the thing that's creating all the heat. And that's an interesting thing that they did there too. So this is a little heat spreader on top of the die of the chip, and you can see they've got some thermal glue holding the whole thing together. Okay, so there's two chips on this whole module that really matter, but they're both interesting. The first one is the main chip, and this one's called a PHY, P-H-Y. It's an Ethernet thing. It's basically the chip that does the Ethernet kind of stuff outside of the magnetics. This is a Marvell 88X3310. It goes by the trade name of Alaska. It's a 10 gig Ethernet PHY, but it also does what they call N-base-T, and that speaks back to that little network switch that I bought, and that this thing can also do 1, 2.5, and I believe also 5 gigabit Ethernet. And it'll just step between the two based on what it can auto-negotiate with the other side. Now, the key thing that I found in the datasheet for this chip, though, is that it dissipates up to 2.5 watts of power. 2.5 watts in a chip that's smaller than my thumbnail with no real heatsink or active cooling. I mean, all you've got really to cool it is just the lid of the SFP plus this teeny little thermal pad that thankfully they put like in the right place to actually make contact with this. Yeah, I am absolutely not surprised with a 2.5 watt dissipation on this chip, why it's running so hot and why it cooked itself. But this is a pretty popular chip in other devices as well, and I'm sure it performs a lot better if it's installed inside like a desktop computer or on a PCIe Ethernet card or something like that, where it's just got, you know, the ability to have a bigger heatsink or better cooling. It is interesting though that they're able to take a chip like this, and this is a BGA chip, and basically just stick it inside an SFP Plus module. I mean, it just kind of barely fits, as you can see. But the other interesting chip is this guy on the back. This is a BB21F16G. At first I thought, oh, it's got to be some sort of like power conditioning or something like that. No, it's actually a microcontroller. This is a 50 megahertz microcontroller. Now, why would you need something like that when you've already got a PHY that's capable of doing all the Ethernet sorts of things? Well, normally you would think that this would report back to the switch as being, oh, it's a 10 gig, 10G base T network adapter, right? And it's capable of doing 10 gig. And no, it actually reported as being a 30 meter multimode optic. And that kind of got me wondering, like, wait a minute, why is this transceiver saying that it's actually for multimode fiber when it's really for copper connections? And as best I can tell, that's just this microcontroller telling the switch something that's going to be the most compatible option. Because I could totally see if you're trying to stick one of these into, say, an older 10 gig switch, or a switch that otherwise can't do that multi-rate Ethernet, the 2.5 or 5 gig, that it's not going to know what to do with that. It's not going to know what, N base T is. It's too old. So the lowest common denominator, like the most common sort of optic that, like at a base level, that a switch would be able to understand is like a 30-meter multimode optic. So that's what they programmed the chip on the back to basically tell the switch that it is. And then the chip basically just acts kind of like a bridge between the two. And just like the switch just gives it the packets and it kind of figures it out from there. And to that point, take a look at what's going on with this switch when I've got that transceiver installed. Here's the power LED. Obviously that's on. None of the ports are lit up because I don't have a cable plugged into them. Yet the link light for this 10 gig adapter is lit up with no cable in it. That is totally not normal behavior for SFPs. Like if I take this fiber optic module and drop it in here, without a cable plugged into it, the link stays down. So yeah, there's definitely a little bit of hackery going on with these adapters to get them to do what they want to do. Now, I think it's worth saying, if you're going to be doing a lot of 10 gig connections and you have to use category cable to do it, buy a switch that has native 10 gig ports like built in on the front. Don't rely on these adapters unless you absolutely have to, because yeah, they all kind of suck in their own way. What I actually did to solve my problem, well, one of the things I did to solve my problem is I picked up another one of these modules. Now you may be thinking, dude, why are you just like, you're just going to keep buying more of these and just like let them cook every year or two and just buy another one? The big thing is this technology has continued to advance. And there's plenty of other manufacturers out there that make these 10 gig Ethernet PHYs. And obviously as time and technology has gone on, they've become more power efficient, and obviously they run a lot cooler that way and whatnot. So my understanding is a transceiver like this one, and I'll include a link to it down in the description if you're interested in picking up one of these for yourself. This is like a newer chip, and it uses only like 1 watt or 1.25 watts or something like that. Basically half the power of this. It's also worth noting that the light doesn't stay on. So this one is obviously a lot smarter. I need to plug this into a managed switch at some time and see what it actually reports as, but clearly it's not doing quite the same shenanigans where it's trying to tell the switch that it's one thing when it really isn't and keeping the network link up. So yeah, if you're running these older transceivers, ow, that one's still hot, upgrade them to something newer. So I've had the new transceiver plugged into the switch for about 10 minutes. I don't think it's exactly heat soaked, but I'm still curious to see what we come up with for temperatures on it. Kind of looking like 31 Celsius or 88-ish degrees Fahrenheit. That's quite a bit cooler than what we saw as the max temp on that old unit. Now, all that said, what did I do to actually solve my problem? Well, this new adapter that I bought went into one port of this switch to connect to my desktop computer because it's a Mac Studio and it's only got, a copper connection on the back. I can't stick a fiber optic module in it or anything like that. So in the very least, I have to have at least one of these in order to get 10 gig networking, from a switch like this into that computer. But for that connection between the two rooms, between these two switches, I just sucked it up and ran fiber through the walls. It was a massive pain, just like I was expecting, and while I was at it, I actually ran a couple more proper Cat 6 cables through the wall as well, just to be a bit future-proof. But, of course, I went with single mode, and now I've got all of that running over fiber optics. These run way cooler than any of these adapters ever possibly could. And these are actually a lot cheaper as well. I mean, you can pick up these 10 gig fiber modules for like 20 bucks these days if you don't really care about the brand or whatever. So yeah, I hope you found this whole thing interesting. I've been on a little bit of an enterprise networking kind of kick. I'm not trying to do a collab retro or anything like that. It's just at my day job, I've been doing a lot more networking work lately. And so I've been thinking about it at home as well and figured maybe you'd find this interesting too. If you like this one, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Here's another episode you should check out. And as always, thanks for watching.